These are the games that make other RPGs feel like they're missing something. And it's not because of size or production value. The systems underneath are so deeply built that, once you've spent time with them, games with shallower mechanics start to feel like they're holding out on you. Play any of these long enough, and going back to something streamlined starts to feel like a step backwards. This is Inquisitor, a 2009 Czech isometric RPG from Wooden Dragon, set in a fictional medieval European world and built around the work of a church inquisitor investigating heresy in a small region. The investigation system is what makes it distinct. You're not fighting toward a villain. You're building a legal case. Every town requires conversation with every resident, evidence gathered, information cross-referenced, bribes paid, or intimidation applied, depending on your build. Once evidence is assembled, you hold a trial. This procedural loop, sustained across a full campaign, has no real equivalent in the genre. Different character classes access different interrogation options, giving the investigation genuine replayability across the 3 starting builds. The combat is real-time with pause, difficult, and demands patience to master. The game makes no accommodation for players who want to skim. Difficulty is high. Tooltips assume patience, and the art direction and absent voice acting reflect a small studio's budget. For the specific player who wants an isometric RPG where systems, investigation, and moral weight are the point rather than the backdrop, Inquisitor offers an experience the genre's mainstream never produced. Atom RPG Trudegrad is a standalone expansion to Atom RPG, built by the 3-person Russian studio Atom team, and set in a post-nuclear Soviet Union. The same creative space as the original Wasteland and Fallout games, but filtered through a very different cultural lens. You play as a Soviet agent investigating the city of Trudegrad, a surviving industrial settlement built over the ruins of a pre-war metropolis, trying to uncover a conspiracy before it destabilizes what's left of post-apocalyptic Soviet civilization. The premise sounds derivative, and the execution is anything but. The skill and stat system takes clear inspiration from the original Fallout special system and deepens it with Soviet-specific applications. Speech graphs split into eloquence and agitation, a gambling skill that unlocks card game encounters with real mechanical weight, and a crafting system for post-apocalyptic Soviet equipment that fits the setting's logic. The turn-based combat rewards build consistency. Melee, guns, and knife fighters each play with genuinely different rhythms, and skill checks that resolve encounters without fighting require specific investment to access. The writing is the unexpected standout, dry, sardonic, politically aware, and occasionally genuinely funny in ways that translate well beyond the source culture. The honest caveat is that the interface is old-fashioned, some late-game content is rougher than the polished opening, and new players will likely want the original Atom RPG for context since this carries forward builds from the first game. But for players who want the original Fallout design philosophy applied with genuine care to a setting no Western studio would have chosen, this game punches well above its weight class. Rogue Trader arrived in December of 23 as Owlcat's most ambitious CRPG to date, and also its most divisive at launch. The Warhammer 40k universe had never received an isometric RPG treatment before, and what Owlcat built around the tabletop Rogue Trader role is a pure turn-based CRPG with a character system they designed from scratch rather than licensing. The result is something deeper than most Warhammer games and rougher than most CRPGs. The archetype system, Owlcat's term for character classes and talent progression, is dense in the way their Pathfinder games were, but leaner in its overhead. Characters develop through talent trees that open new combat roles and synergize with party composition in specific ways. The cover and positioning system, the action point economy, and the momentum mechanic that builds through successful actions and unlocks burst turn abilities all feed into a combat loop that reviewers described as more focused than Wrath of the Righteous while maintaining comparable depth. The mathematical density could discomfort players who aren't enthusiasts. A tooltip for precise attack alone runs multiple lines of percentage interactions. there are some familiar criticisms. The void ship battles were widely criticized as slow and mandatory in ways that don't complement the ground combat's pace. The game launched with bugs that subsequent patches addressed. For Owlcat games, you're playing the worst version before the patches land, and Road Trader followed the same pattern. But the setting, the 40K universe's political and theological texture brought into an isometric RPG with real weight, rewards the player willing to engage with it fully.
It's too strong. Yes,
The character creation screen in Wrath of the Righteous is the first boss fight. 25 base classes, each subdivided into 4 to 6 archetypes, plus 13 prestige classes visible during creation in case you want to plan toward them, plus race, heritage, background, religion, feats, skills, and an animal companion that gets its own class, skills, and feats. PC Gamer called it the most complicated character creation system they could think of. That's the entry point. The game then tells you that the entire campaign is really about continuing to make that character. The Mythic Path system is what separates Wrath from everything else Owlcat has built. Partway through the first act, you choose a mythic identity which functions as a second progression axis alongside your class build. Mythic abilities interact with class abilities in ways that the game doesn't fully spell out, which means that a Demon Path Inquisitor with specific feat interactions creates a genuinely different combat experience from something like a Trickster Path Sorcerer. The replayability isn't just an invitation, it's a design argument that the game contains more than one character inside it, but its limitations are visible throughout. The Crusade mode, army management between acts, is functional at best and a tedious interruption at worst. Some acts sprawl past their welcome. The game shipped with bugs that took patches to address. PC Gamer summarized it as having room for half-baked areas alongside its high points. All of that is true, and none of it changes that for the audience it's built for. Wrath of the Righteous is one of the most mechanically complete expressions of what an isometric RPG can contain. Pillars of Eternity 2 landed in 2018 to middling commercial results and critical consensus that it was the stronger game mechanically and narratively than its predecessor, a frustrating combination that nearly ended the studio's CRPG ambitions. Set in the island archipelago of the Deadfire, it follows your watcher pursuing the god Aethys, who has stolen your soul and is walking across the ocean floor, destroying the pillars that hold up the world's divine order. The premise sounds grand, and the execution is exactly as morally dense as the setup implies. The multi-class system is the centerpiece. Every class combination is available from character creation, with each combination generating a merged ability pool that requires thinking about synergies rather than just picking complementary slots. The distinction between active and passive abilities, the resource management of per-encounter versus per-rest abilities, and the ship combat system layered over the overworld exploration give the game more mechanical real estate than almost any RPG of its era. Companions also multi-class, which means team composition isn't a matter of role-filling, but of build architecture. Its shortcomings that contributed to its commercial underperformance are very real. The main quest line can feel reactive rather than propulsive. Chasing Aethys means you're always behind him, and some players found the sense of agency thin compared to the richness of the faction work. The ship combat is slow and rarely as engaging as land encounters. But this is a game that rewards deep engagement with its systems in ways that replay after replay reveals, and its failure to find its audience remains one of the genuine losses in the genre's recent history. Colony Ship is Iron Tower Studios' second game, the same studio that took 11 years to build Age of Decadence, and it carries forward the same design philosophy in a science fiction setting. Released in full in 2023, it's set aboard a generation ship centuries into its journey from Earth, where the original mission structure has long since collapsed into factions. The officers in charge of the ship, the fundamentalist colonists who've built a religious civilization in the cargo bays, and the engineers maintaining systems they no longer fully understand. You navigate this collapsed civilization with a character whose background, skills, and alignment determine what exists for them. The skill system draws from Age of Decadence and is equally unforgiving about build coherence. Combat, stealth, persuasion, hacking, and lockpicking skills don't just gate options. They constitute the game's content. A character with high combat skills fights through encounters that a high persuasion character talks around, and a stealth character bypasses entirely. Colony ship commits. The skills you didn't build aren't available for your character. The combat is turn-based on a grid with action points, cover, flanking, and status effect interactions. And on higher difficulties, a single failed encounter can end a run. The early game, however, is brutal with almost no guidance, and the gap between a functional build and an incoherent one is punishing enough that new players routinely restart hours in. For the audience who want an RPG where skill investment has real consequences and builds genuinely change the game's content, Colony Ship is one of the most disciplined executions of that philosophy available.
She cannot.
This is a game that Larian Studios had been building toward since at least the first original Sin. One where the full implications of its elemental interaction system were given enough room to actually express themselves. The critical response to Divinity Original Sin 2 is a reflection of that. The environmental system is what separates it. Every surface has properties that interact with each other and with abilities in real time. Ignite a poison cloud. Freeze a wet surface into ice to shatter with physical damage. Electrify a pool of water to chain lightning through multiple enemies. Blood from wounds creates a surface that can be frozen or ignited. The system generates combat states that you didn't plan and rewards the player who can read and exploit them faster than the enemy. Combine this with a source ability system that restricts your most powerful moves and must be recharged through specific world interactions, and every combat encounter becomes a tactical problem with multiple valid solutions. The 4 Origin system, which is 6 unique characters each with their own history, divine spark, and narrative investment, means the writing varies significantly between playthroughs. Lone Wolf mode strips the party to 2 characters and compensates with power scaling, creating a fundamentally different game from a full party run. But if we're being honest here, the third act loses some systemic density, and the finale divides players between those who find it satisfying and those who feel the narrative ambition outruns the execution. Neither position is wrong.
Don't make me say it again.
Baldur's Gate 2 is the game the genre spent the next 20 years either trying to replicate or reacting against. Released in 2000 by BioWare, it adapted the AD&D 2nd Edition rule set with a fidelity and depth that the Infinity Engine made possible, and wrapped it in a narrative built around personal stakes rather than world-ending prophecy. The primary driver is that your wizard companion has been kidnapped by a mage obsessed with your power, and the story stays rooted in that personal conflict even when the scope expands. The depth of the system is difficult to fully describe to someone who hasn't been inside it. Spell school interactions, class kit distinctions, the mage's spellbook as a strategic resource managed across rests, thief skill allocation, determining which dialogue and trap options are available, dual classing as a gamble that temporarily weakens a character in exchange for future power. All of it operating under a rule set that rewards learning in ways that modern auto-calculating systems abstract away. Companion writing is exceptional and frequently brilliant. Some are defining entries in RPG party history. But the gap between the game's ambitions and its sometimes chaotic, real-time with pause execution. Large battles can become a mess where understanding what happened is difficult even for experienced players. The early game money crunch is notoriously punishing for players who don't know where to direct their efforts first. But this sequel remains the standard against which every isometric RPG since has been measured. Not because nothing has surpassed individual elements, but because nothing has matched the totality of what it accomplished. Tyranny is the only isometric RPG built around the premise that evil has already won. Obsidian's 2016 release puts you in the role of a Fatebinder, a legal and military agent of the Overlord Kairos, whose conquest of the world is complete, and asks you to administer the aftermath. There are no rebels left to join. The resistance is scattered, hiding in ruins, and your job is to resolve what remains. The moral framework this creates is unlike anything else in the genre. Every alignment decision is a shade of evil or compromise, and the game's writing is sophisticated enough to make each option genuinely uncomfortable. The lore-based magic system is Tyranny's most distinct mechanical achievement. Rather than selecting from a preset spell list, you construct spells by combining a core ability type with expression modifiers and accent effects, creating personalized spells that belong to your specific character. Combined with the artifacts system, ancient weapons that level up alongside the player and unlock powers through use. The mechanical meat is richer than the game's modest runtime suggests. The amount of content, or lack thereof, is its only real flaw. Tyranny is short by CRPG standards, 12 to 15 hours for a thorough first playthrough, and the ending arrives before the scope of the world it establishes seems to warrant. Obsidian confirmed a sequel was planned and canceled due to commercial underperformance. What remains feels like an opening, and several plot threads are left unresolved. But within what it does complete, the political writing, the magic system, and the moral architecture of a world where you're complicit from the first screen, Tyranny is one of the most original isometric RPGs ever made. Disco Elysium removes combat entirely and builds its RPG system around the inside of a detective's broken mind. It won Game of the Year from multiple outlets and produced reviews that struggled with the fact that the conventional vocabulary for describing an RPG didn't quite cover what they were playing. The Final Cut version added full voice acting to every line of dialogue, thousands of lines, which transformed what was already exceptional into something that felt definitively unlike anything else in the genre. The system is 24 skills divided across 4 categories: intellect, psyche, physique, and motorics. Each skill has a personality and argues with you in dialogue. Your inland empire whispers conspiratorial possibilities. Your encyclopedia states facts that may or may not be relevant. Your electrochemistry wants you to take every drug you encounter. Investing in a skill is investing in a voice inside your character's head, and those voices disagree, which means a high intellect, low physique detective experiences the city of Revachol differently from a high motorics, low psyche one. The skill system is a characterization system, which no other RPG has attempted at this scale. The political philosophy system of 5 distinct ideological orientations that respond to specific dialogue choices and shape which conclusions remain available, makes the game contain substantially different experiences across playthroughs. But players expecting conventional RPG feedback loops will find the absence of combat and the density of text disorienting at first. But once the system's logic becomes clear, Disco Elysium reveals itself as the deepest investigation of what role-playing means of the genre has ever produced.